On my birthday, my parents didn't bring out a cake. They brought out spectators. Nearly 100 relatives sat neatly in their chairs as my father pushed a folder across the table like he was finalizing a deal. Inside was an invoice, almost $250,000, itemized as the cost of raising me. My mother silently removed my photos from the wall. My sister reached for my car keys and said Dad had already transferred them. Then my manager stood up and terminated me on the spot. I didn't cry, I didn't protest, I walked out without a word. Before I tell you how that silence turned into something they never saw coming, tap like and tell me where you're listening from. And if your family ever tried to tear you down like this, your voice might matter more than you think. My name is Rachel. I'm in my early 30s, and for most of my life, I was the child my family never quite knew how to place. I wasn't loud enough to impress anyone. I wasn't delicate enough to protect. I learned early that in our home, love was quiet, conditional, and usually came with expectations attached. From the outside, my family appeared perfect. A big house, a long driveway, holiday dinners that felt more like staged photos than memories. Neighbors whispered about how fortunate we were. Inside, everything operated on rules no one ever said out loud. My father, Thomas, believed money defined value. My mother, Margaret, believed silence meant harmony. And my younger sister, Chloe, learned early that being admired was a talent, and she perfected it. Growing up, I was the dependable one, the fixer. When the internet crashed before a gathering, I handled it. When bills stacked up or accounts got tangled, I sorted them quietly. I never questioned it. I never asked to be noticed. I thought that's what family was, showing up even when no one clapped. The framed photos told another story. Chloe's smile filled the walls. Graduations, trips, carefully framed milestones. My pictures were fewer, tucked into edges, easy to remove. I noticed, but convinced myself it didn't matter. I had my own life, my own job. I paid my own rent, drove my own car. Independence felt like protection. That night, the night of the dinner, I came straight from work, still wearing my jacket and practical shoes. I paused in the doorway, shifting my bag on my shoulder, listening to conversation spill into the hall. Laughter, glasses clinking. My name floated through the room once or twice, followed by polite smiles. My mother barely glanced at me when I entered. She was too busy smoothing her dress, making sure everything looked right. My father was already performing, shaking hands, telling stories. Chloe stood near the center, glowing, confident, comfortable, like she belonged there in a way I never fully did. I told myself it was just a birthday dinner, that I was overthinking. Families are awkward. People say the wrong things. I took my seat, folded my hands, and waited. I didn't realize yet that this wasn't a celebration. It was a trap. Dinner unfolded exactly as always. Perfect timing, perfect presentation. Plates arrived together. Wine was poured without asking. Conversations overlapped just enough to sound warm, never enough to feel real. I smiled when someone caught my eye, nodded when an aunt praised the house. But something felt wrong, like a quiet hum beneath the table. Halfway through the meal, my mother stood. She didn't tap her glass. She didn't announce anything. She walked to the wall behind me where the framed photos hung in a careful grid. Family vacations, holiday mornings, Chloe at every milestone. Then, without speaking, she reached up and lifted one frame. It was a photo of me, just me, 16 years old, sunburned, laughing at something unseen. The sound it made wasn't loud. A soft scrape, paper against wall. She placed it face down on the sideboard and returned to her chair like nothing had happened. No one reacted. That's what made it hurt more. My father cleared his throat. The room fell silent, not because he asked, but because people were used to obeying him. He smiled the way he did when he thought he was being fair. It was heavy, too heavy for paper alone. I opened it slowly, aware of every gaze in the room. Inside was a single page, clean, detailed. Charges, payments, years reduced to a final total, rounded. but precise enough to sting. Just under $250,000 for everything we spent raising you, he continued. Education, food, housing, everything. My ears rang. Someone laughed nervously. I couldn't tell who. This isn't a punishment, he added. It's responsibility. You're an adult. I looked at him, at my mother, staring at her plate, at my sister, who didn't look surprised at all. And if you can't, my father said, lowering his voice just enough to sound reasonable, then we should take some distance. That was the moment it all made sense. This was never about money. It wasn't even about power. It was about erasing me and calling it accountability, turning love into a balance sheet, turning my life into a bad investment they could finally close. My hands stayed calm as I shut the folder. My chest didn't. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Because before I could even push my chair back, my sister leaned in, her fingers already grazing something cold and metallic on the table. And that's when the dinner dropped the act. Chloe didn't hurry. She never does. She's always understood timing better than anyone in that room. Her hand slid across the table, slow and intentional, until her fingers wrapped around my car keys. The quiet clink of metal cut through the room louder than any toast that night. She didn't look at me right away. She rolled the keyring once, watching it catch the light, then smiled like she was doing me a favor. Dad already transferred it, she said, calm, almost indifferent. I stared at the keys a moment longer than necessary. That car wasn't luxury, it wasn't impressive. It was just mine. Or at least, I thought it was. That's when I understood how carefully this had all been arranged. Even my independence had been borrowed. Before I could respond, my father gestured toward the far end of the table. That brings us to the final matter, he said, like he was closing out a meeting. That's when I noticed my manager standing near the doorway. Mark. He looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. His hands were clasped too tightly, his eyes landing everywhere except on me. I didn't know he'd be here, I thought, though some part of me already did. Mark cleared his throat. Rachel, he said, voice uneven, based on certain concerns brought to my attention tonight, we've decided to terminate your position. No forms, no office, no warning. Just one sentence, served over dinner like an afterthought. The room stayed silent. 100 people watching, waiting for tears, for anger, for begging, something they could replay later and feel justified about. Nothing came. I felt empty for exactly 3 seconds. Then something else settled in, heavy, solid, clear. I stood up slowly, pushed my chair in, picked up the folder and slid it into my bag like it was just mail. I looked at my father. He was smiling, relieved, like he'd finally walked away from a bad deal. I looked at my mother. She was focused on her napkin. I looked at Chloe, already swinging my keys from one finger, victorious. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I crossed the driveway alone. No one followed. No one called after me. By the time I reached the street, the house behind me had already closed ranks. I didn't know where I was going yet. I only knew I wasn't going back. I didn't flee somewhere dramatic. No airport. No friend's couch. No breakdown in a parking lot. I walked 3 miles, maybe more, past quiet homes with porch lights glowing, past sprinklers ticking like metronomes, past couples laughing in kitchens that smelled like dinner and ordinary lives. With every step, the shock drained out of my body and left something colder behind. By the time I reached my apartment, my feet ached, but my hands were steady. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I dropped my bag onto the chair, set the folder on my desk, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life. Dark background, blinking cursor. This was the only place that still made sense. I'm a cybersecurity analyst. My work isn't revenge. It's pattern recognition. It's noticing what doesn't belong. It's following trails people assume no one can see. And my family had always been careless with theirs. I started small, old payments I'd helped manage over the years. Transfers my father had brushed off as timing issues or accounting noise. Back then, I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. Families don't audit each other, but systems don't lie. They just wait. Within an hour, the first pattern surfaced. Money moving in clean, repeated amounts. Not random, not accidental. I recognized the names instantly. Uncle Paul, Aunt Helen, good people, careful people. The kind who still sent birthday cards with handwritten notes. The money never stayed where it was supposed to. It pooled briefly, then moved again. Out, always out. Into accounts tied to expenses that had nothing to do with investments. Luxury rentals. Designer charges. Flights, hotels, a lifestyle, Chloe's lifestyle. My stomach didn't drop. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't only cruelty. It was something deeper, heavier, something with consequences. My phone vibrated on the desk. Once, then again, I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. I kept working. I didn't hack anything. I didn't access a single thing I wasn't legally allowed to see. I simply organized what already existed. I built timelines, matched amounts, labeled payments and expenses the way they actually worked. Not the way my father had always explained them. By the time sunlight crept through the blinds, the story was finished. And it was ugly. I saved everything, backed it up, took a slow breath. That's when I finally checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages stacked on top of each other. My mother, my father, Chloe, then Mark. Mark's message was short and frantic. He said he needed to talk, that there'd been a misunderstanding, that he'd been pressured, that maybe we could fix this. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled to the number I'd hoped I'd never need. The regional director, the woman who approved my last project, the one who stayed calm while everyone else panicked during a security incident last year. She answered on the second ring. "Rachel," she said. "It's late," I replied. I explained that I'd been terminated that night, outside HR, outside procedure, that it happened at a private family event. Silence. "And my manager," I continued, "based that decision on personal information supplied by my parents." The silence shifted, deepened. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. I made coffee while I waited. Black, bitter, familiar. 4 minutes later, an email arrived. My access restored. Another followed, formal, exact. Mark was being placed on administrative leave pending review. I was instructed to take the day off and return the following week. I sat down slowly, the warmth of the mug steadying my hands. One pillar down. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. It was my father. "Rachel," he said, voice tight. "You need to fix this." "I didn't break anything," I said. "You sent something," he snapped. "I organized information," I replied. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "I do," I answered. He showed up at my apartment that afternoon. Not the man from the dinner party. No practiced smile. No audience. Just a tired, angry man standing too close to my door. "Open it," he said. I cracked the door enough to see his face. "We did this for the family," he rushed. "For stability." "You invoiced me," I said. "That was a lesson," he replied. "You used other people's money," I said. His eyes shifted away. Behind him, Chloe hovered near the stairs. No confidence now. No glow. Just fear she couldn't fully hide. "This doesn't have to go further," my father said. "Not for me," I said. My phone rang again. My uncle. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He thanked me. "You didn't destroy the family," he said quietly. My father heard it. His shoulders slumped, like something inside him finally gave way. "Please," he said. I looked at him. Really looked, for the first time without wanting anything back. You taught me every action has a cost, I said. I closed the door. The fallout didn't take long. Accounts were frozen. Questions became investigations. Conversations happened without me present. The house that once felt untouchable suddenly wasn't. Chloe lost everything she'd built on borrowed money. Sponsors vanished. Invitations stopped. She tried calling, then texting, then silence. My mother sent one message, only one. I didn't respond. A week later, I sat at my desk at work. Same chair, same screen, different weight in my chest. Lighter, cleaner. I deleted the folder from my laptop. Not because it didn't matter anymore, but because I didn't need to carry it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't managing their mess. I wasn't paying their bills. I wasn't fixing their systems. I was done. The consequences didn't arrive with sirens or headlines. They arrived quietly, the way real accountability usually does. My uncle and aunt took control of their finances. The transfers stopped. Questions were asked. Then more questions. The house that once felt permanent became provisional. Decisions were made without my parents at the center. That alone changed everything. Chloe faded from the spotlight first. The trips ended, the shopping stopped. People who once orbited her found other places to be. She took a job she'd once laughed at. I didn't celebrate it. I just noticed the silence where entitlement used to live. My father called less and less. When he did, his voice was smaller. No demands, no speeches. Just fragments of regret he couldn't quite turn into apologies. My mother sent one final message asking if we could talk someday. Not out of anger, out of clarity. At work, things settled into a new rhythm. My access stayed active. Projects continued. Colleagues treated me the same. And that normalcy was its own kind of relief. I took the day off like I was told. I slept, I cooked. I sat with the silence and let it stay silent. 4 days after the dinner, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls piled up. Voicemails I didn't play. I flipped the phone face down on the table and watched it vibrate until it finally stopped. That's when I understood what had really changed. They no longer controlled the story. They no longer controlled me. I wasn't disowned. I was released. And for the first time, the space around me felt like it actually belonged to me. Here's what I learned. Family isn't the place where you're priced, audited, or threatened into obedience. Love doesn't arrive with invoices, and silence, when it's chosen, can be stronger than any argument. If this story felt personal, if you've ever had to protect your future from the people who were supposed to protect you, share your experience in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. And if you want to hear more stories like this, tap subscribe and stay with me. You're not alone.